What is going on? I want to welcome you from F Court. I am Sean Murphy, and today I want to sit down and talk a little bit more about that preseason debut of the Detroit Pistons because I know that a lot of people's first reaction after that game was, "Oh my God, the Pistons lost. Everyone needs to be fired." Which, typical preseason reaction. But anyway, in all seriousness, I think there was actually a lot of really good to take away from that game. Like if you actually go back and watch the footage, not pay attention to the score or the result because it's a preseason game where the score and the result does not matter. You can actually look at these players' games and take a lot away. That's really positive. I mean, we talked quite a bit in the podcast specifically about Jaden Ivy, and he was 6 of 9 from the field. He didn't have a single turnover. He had a steal. He had 2 assists. He had 4 rebounds. He was very active and looked composed for his first game, but he wasn't the only rookie that I was impressed with because quite frankly, there was few players that stood out quite like Jalen Duren when he was on the court. When Jalen Duren checked in, the number one thing I wanted to see from him this preseason is he an NBA player right now? Yes or no? Because regardless of the answer, I still think he's going to be great. I still think his potential is really high, but does he deserve minutes on this roster right now? Because I know a lot of people are clamoring for saying, and even people are saying that he should be starting day one. And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. I get the excitement. I mean, the guy looks like an athletic freak, and his ceiling of what he can be should absolutely be in the starting lineup. But he's also the youngest player in the draft, the youngest player in this class, youngest player in the NBA. Like let's slow it down a little bit. And then Jalen Duren played. And he got 5 boards in his first 3 minutes. He finished with 14 total. He only committed 3 personal fouls, which for 24 minutes for a rookie big is pretty impressive. But the thing that perhaps was the most impressive about Jalen Duren's performance, how athletic and how switchable of a big he is day one, or at least he seemed to be during this game because he showed flashes of being able to be a great perimeter big on the defensive end. He also showed flashes of his ferocity around the rim with that one ferocious block he had. He wasn't really super active on the offensive end. I mean, he only finished with 2 points. He was 1 of 3 from the field, like that wasn't really where his focus was, but that's not the way that he's going to be earning minutes on this team right now anyway. I mean, Dwayne Casey set the precedent for him. He set the tone in his first press conference saying that the way that Jalen Duren's going to get on the court is by playing hard on defense, hustling up and down the court, and getting on the glass. What did Jalen Duren do in his first preseason game? He ran up and down the court. He even dove for loose balls on occasion. He got back on the defensive end, even switched on the perimeter and didn't allow easy threes. He didn't really commit many fouls, didn't commit too many mistakes, showed he was trustworthy. And quite frankly, if there was a takeaway I had, like one thing we can say for certain about Jalen Duren, he's not going to be starting day one, but he sure as hell is never going to touch a G League gym. When we first drafted Duren, there was some conversation and some speculation about whether or not Jalen Duren would ever see time with the Motor City Cruise. And if that's possibly where he would start the season, just because he was so young, he was so raw, give him some time to develop as the Pistons are looking to be a little bit more competitive, right? During Summer League, it felt like, okay, maybe this guy won't touch a G League gym. But then he went out against the Knicks. And I know like the Knicks have a reputation for not being the greatest team on the face of the planet, but Let me remind you, this was a team that hosted a playoff series like a year and a half ago against an Atlanta Hawks team that went on to go to the Eastern Conference Finals. Sure, they had some fluky things that happened that helped them get there, but that's a whole other can of worms that this video just doesn't need right now. So we're just going to ignore that. But nonetheless, this is a team that was top 10 defensively a couple years ago. And even last year, they were still a good defensive team. That was not what, ultimately was their undoing. And Jalen Brunson, as much as y'all gave me for liking him, he looked pretty damn good, didn't he? Just saying. But even through all that, the number one thing that you want to see out of those preseason games, and just to touch on some of the hysteria that has been coming from these last couple days, because man, I did not realize that some of y'all forgot how young this team was. Like, and again, being competitive doesn't even necessarily mean that this team's a lock to be a playoff team this year. They're better than what they were. One thing that is clear when you see this roster on the court is that there is far more talent from top to bottom. I mean, it was an honest question of, like when Hamidou wasn't playing, it was kind of a concern of, is he not going to make this rotation? Which was a legitimate thought that you could have for a second because the Pistons are that much deeper than they were last year. Thankfully, Hamidou just had a minor injury. He'll be fine. In fact, he should be playing on Friday when the Pistons face the Pelicans. We'll have more coverage on that later. But even in the midst of all that, because when you really look at like who truly struggled in this game, a lot of it was, obviously Cade and Sadiq, aka your two best players. The guys that shined were your rookies, and even the veteran that came into the roster last week. So for all this talk, because I even saw people after the first preseason game already saying fire Dwayne Casey, which if you're going to make any franchise decisions or any definitive decisions about about whether or not someone should have a job based off of a preseason game, not even a week into training camp, you're out of your gourd. But seriously, a sign of good coaching is the fact that the rookies looked prepared to play. Jaden Ivy and Jalen Duren both looked ready to be on the court. Both shined in their own individual ways. The guys that struggled are the ones that are going to be able to bounce back and aren't going to have a worse game the next time around. Cade Cunningham isn't going to shoot 3 for 12 every night. Sadiq Bey isn't going to shoot 1 for 8 every night. I mean, we saw that guy get a 51 burger back in March. Like, remember that? Anyone? Just me? That's why you have to allow preseason to just be observation, learning, looking at what the team does well now, where we need to grow throughout the preseason and throughout the season in general. And the only true concerns that you can take are the ones that should actually probably be the red flags. Like, for example, I know a lot of people were like worried about the turnovers and stuff, which is legitimate. I mean, Cade Cunningham led the team with 4 turnovers. Corey Joseph had a couple moments where there was a rookie guard on the Knicks side that was really aggressive. I think the one thing that I would actually be concerned about from this game, like when you're looking at the box sheet, is the rebounding. And this is kind of where it circles back to Jalen Duren, because I think this is where we're going to have a pretty interesting conversation as the season goes on, because Isaiah Stewart and Bojan Bogdanovic for this game combined for 5 rebounds. 5. Your starting front court cannot combine for 5 rebounds. Perhaps more concerning is that Isaiah Stewart only grabbed 1 of those boards. Now, you could say, well, this is a more positionless league. It's a more positionless lineup. Guys don't necessarily have the same conventional, traditional role, but like, no. Like you can't as a front court in an NBA game combined for 5 rebounds. Even if you're only playing 22 minutes each in the game. Especially when somehow you as the team won the rebounding battle. Like, that's the weird thing. And which, by the way, you know why they won the rebounding battle? Because of Jalen Duren. Because in his 24 minutes, he managed to out-rebound them both combined by 9. And this is where the conversation comes in. This is where the storyline in the back of your head gets planted of, when could we start talking about Jalen Duren entering the starting lineup? I know some of y'all want to start that conversation right now. It's too early. It just is. He has to show more on the offensive end. He has to show that he can do that on a consistent basis. Anything that is done in less than 10-game increments in the NBA is considered a fad. It is not considered a trend analytically, statistically, and generally speaking by executives, unless it's done over a significant sample size. So we need to see 10, 15, 20 games of Jalen Duren consistently playing well. So more than likely, it's not going to be right away. In fact, it's more than likely going to be at some point, like a third or halfway through the season, where I think we start having a serious conversation of whether or not Jalen Duren should be entering the lineup. I also don't think Isaiah Stewart's going to rebound this poorly each and every night. However, it does point back to some of the consistency issues that he did have on the boards. And it does kind of point out the one potential big flaw in putting Bojan Bogdanovic and Isaiah Stewart at the 4 and the 5. I mean, the one thing you could do is you could slide Isaiah Stewart over to the 4 and Duren into the 5. And then therefore you have that physical big front court that you're talking about. However, again, you need to see more of a sample size of Isaiah Stewart in the 4 as well, which the Pistons will definitely be toying with. I hope they toy with more of that throughout this preseason. I hope we get to see some Duren Stewart minutes against New Orleans. I would be very interested to see how that works. But there has to be that consistency from both of them, and there has to be that proof that they can do it over a period of time. And overall, I really like the foundation of where we're beginning. Yes, I know we technically lost by a crap ton of points. I know that on paper, it looked like we got blown out, and that it's like, oh gosh, are we going to keep losing all these games again? And I can assure you that's not even going to be the worst of any potential loss that this Pistons team has this year. There's going to be highs and lows. There's going to be a learning curve. However, this team's going to be way more competitive. More and more nights they're going to be in games. And more nights they're going to pull out wins. And if there's anything that this game showed at all, it appears the Pistons have a couple rookies that look ready to tackle the NBA. And it looks like the Pistons traded for the guy that is exactly advertised in Bojan Bogdanovic. 3 of 5 from beyond the arc, 3 of 6 from the field. Super stout on defense, better than people expect, bigger than you think on the court. Looks like he fits right in the system. Looks like he was already helping make the guys better. Seems like he fits seamlessly wherever the Pistons put him on the court. Overall, I think there's a lot to be optimistic about, and I think specifically Jalen Duren is going to be one of the biggest storylines for the Pistons this season. What do you think of Jalen Duren? What did you think of his performance? What do you want to see from him throughout the rest of this preseason? Also, be sure you're tuning into Will We're Pistons for all the coverage we're going to be having all preseason, but also all season long. But also be sure you follow me on Twitter at Sean Halfcourt for all the updates, all the articles, all the things I'll be doing as well. But with that, folks, I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and we will catch you guys next time from Halfcourt. Sure to subscribe.